Shana Tova. We have a chance to study a little bit together now. So if you picked up the handout on the way in that says B period Yoma 87A at the top, that's the sheet we're looking at. Does anybody need a copy of the sheet? Show of hands. Fawn has extra copies in the back. Thank you, Fawn. All right, anybody in this front section need we're good. All right. Well, when it comes to the question of doing teshuvah, of making amends, our sources are replete with texts that deal with questions like, what constitutes a kosher apology? That's an important question. How about, how far does the apologizer have to go if their apology is not accepted? That's important too. We would want to know the answer to that. Even the question of mortality, which hangs over these 10 days like a shadow, even our mortality is no barrier for the rabbis who openly grapple with the question of whether a wrongdoer can apologize to a group of representatives on behalf of a victim who subsequently passed away and therefore couldn't be present to accept the apology. Our sources are filled with material on all of these subjects, and they've animated Jewish conversations about repentance for the last 2,000 years. This morning, I'd like to explore new material with you, which has gotten comparatively little attention in the Jewish communal conversation around teshuvah. I'd like for us to consider the related and difficult question, what about the plight of the one who absolutely has been wronged, and yet the wrongdoer refuses to apologize at all? Now, I hope you haven't been in this situation. This is a problem philosophically in Jewish law. It's clear on the one hand that Jewish law requires the wrongdoer to apologize. But the apology cannot be forced. It has to be freely given in order for it to be authentic. Just like we teach our preschoolers, the apology doesn't count unless the apologizer means it. But the recalcitrant apologizer also presents us with a psychological conundrum. Because the one who knows that she or he has done something wrong, but refuses to take responsibility for it, that person scars us. They inflict a further wound in our souls, and they rob us of the satisfaction of any kind of healing or closure from the rift that their wrongdoing caused in the first place. What do we do in such a situation? For some of us, our default position here might be described as passive. I'm going to sit by the phone, so to speak. I'll wait for the wrongdoer to reach out to me. But when that call doesn't come, does Jewish law provide us with some kind of latitude to move beyond passivity to try to compel the wrongdoer to offer the kind of apology that will ultimately enable us to move on? That's the question that we're going to be exploring this morning. This is a question that is addressed directly in the Babylonian Talmud, tractate Yoma. This is a tractate dealing with the laws of Yom Kippur, found on page 87a, a text that was written, or final editing, approximately 1,500 years ago. There, the rabbis share two remarkably different examples about how to navigate or how to not navigate, we'll come back to that question at the end, this difficult scenario. And they both appear on your handout. The text begins with what we'll call the Rabbi Zera approach to this question. It's related that when Rabbi Zera had a legitimate complaint against a person who had insulted or wronged him, and you'll use your imagination as to the essence of the insult or the wrong. And he was feeling such internal shpilkus that poor Rabbi Zera could not sleep at night until he found closure with this individual that had hurt him. So Rabbi Zera would pace back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, again and again and again, before him, before the wrongdoer, so that the person would come to appease him and apologize. And Joy, in this scenario, I'm Rabbi Zera, and you are the horrible wrongdoer, and let's use imagination about this terrible insult that Joy has done to me, and I've been waiting by the phone for Joy's apology. Can you believe it? The call never came. And I'm incensed about it. I can't sleep at night, and so I decide I'm going to conduct a kind of a one-person protest outside Joy's office. Hi, Joy, how are you? Remember me? I'm the one that you hurt really, really badly. Do you have anything you want to say to me, Joy? Then she goes to lunch. Joy, I'm still here. Anything that you want to talk about? I'm waiting, right? This is the Rabbi Zera approach. So the primary question that we have to assess in the Rabbi Zera scenario: is this the kind of behavior that we would encourage another to do? Should Wow, bonus points. Who said that? Well said, my dear. Should Rabbi Zera be lauded for his willingness to go out of his way to make it easy and pleasant for Joy to apologize? Or is this a classic Jewish example of seriously unhealthy, guilt-inducing passive aggressiveness? Zera was perfectly comfortable getting in his wrongdoer's face, but Zera was not comfortable openly, maturely broaching a difficult conversation. The rabbis, it seems, were aware of the fine line between the virtue of a direct conversation and the danger of being overly aggressive. We see that anxiety on display in the second example, the so-called Rav approach. Just one quick note about this second text, which makes it a tad confusing. Rav and Abba are the same person with two different names. The rabbis were complicated in that respect. Okay. As it is written in the text, it is further related that Rav had a complaint against none other than the town butcher, who in this case is going to be our friend Ellen Plum Rosenberg, the town butcher, who had insulted Rav. Now, I mean, it's the butcher. We must use our imagination here that this was a serious, significant complaint and insult. I went to the butcher and I asked for first cut, extra lean corned beef, and you gave me the second cut. I mean, come on. It's scandalous. Shame on the butcher. Okay. In all seriousness, the Talmudic author here seems to be waving a red flag right off the bat in this example by making the wrongdoer a butcher. Think about the associations that we have with butchers: bloodshed, violence. Is the Talmudic author suggesting that that was the impact of the butcher's actions? That some form of violence was committed against Rav, either literal or metaphoric, in the past? Or maybe the reference to this person being a butcher is meant to foreshadow a coming act of violence. Buckle your seatbelts. The butcher did not come before Rav to apologize. I was waiting by the phone for the apology. Not that Ellen would actually. There was no apology. And so an entire year on the calendar passed. And as the text reports, now it's Kol Nidre. It is the beginning of Yom Kippur, and I have waited by the phone for the butcher to call me the entire year, and the phone call doesn't come in. And so Rav says, I will go and I will appease the butcher. I'll take the high road. I will go out and have the mature, direct conversation with this schmendrick of a butcher. I will do that, and I'll let the butcher know that I did not appreciate this behavior. It was hurtful to me. And I will politely ask the butcher to apologize. What's the worst thing that could happen? As the text reports, Rav was on his way to the butcher's shop when he bumped into his student, Rav Huna, who said to Rav, "Where's my master going in such a hurry before the holiday?" And Rav said to him, "I am going to try to elicit an apology from the butcher." Translation, I'm going to go to the butcher, give the butcher a piece of my mind to try and make it easy for the butcher, or try to guilt the butcher into apologizing so that we can all tie up these loose ends before Kol Nidre, before Yom Kippur comes in. And Rav Huna thought that this was the most terrible, horrible idea he had ever heard. And he tried to stop Rav on this mission by calling out to Rav by his name. Rav, slow down, don't do this, you're making a mistake. But he couldn't get Rav to stop. And so Rav Huna started screaming in public, calling for, dial 911. There's an incident that's about to happen at the butcher shop. This is not going to end well. He said, Abba, this is what he's calling out to the 911 operator. Abba, otherwise known as Rav, is going to kill somebody, for surely that person's end will not be good. But Rav Huna's histrionics were to no avail, because Rav, being the super speedy guy that he is, had already made it to the butcher's shop. Rav went and stood by him, by the butcher that is. So, "Hi Ellen, I have come stealthily into your store." And Rav stood over the butcher, would really be the better translation of the text here. There's this kind of an image of a height difference between the two, right? I'm Rav, I'm the tall guy. You're sitting down at the butcher's table, right? There's some kind of significance to that moment. And Rav found the butcher sitting and splitting open the head of an animal, because that's what butchers do right before Yom Kippur, apparently. And the butcher raised up the butcher's eyes and saw Rav and said to him, "Are you Abba? Are you Rav? Go away! I've got nothing to say to you." And as he said that, while he was splitting open the animal's head, one of the bones of the animal's head flew out and struck the butcher in the throat, killing the butcher, thereby, unfortunately, fulfilling Rav Huna's prediction. It's a crazy text. What do we make of the butcher's death? Did the Talmudic author mean to convey that the butcher was so horrible, had behaved so terribly toward Rav, that the behavior was deserving of divine punishment because of his failure to apologize? Maybe. That would be consistent with the setup of the story, that the whole entire year had gone with the butcher failing to take responsibility for the butcher's actions. Now it's Yom Kippur, the butcher stands in judgment, and God has acted. According to this reading, the butcher does not deserve, not Ellen of course, to be inscribed in the book of life. Or is there an alternative reading? That it was somehow Rav's aggressiveness. Look how the text goes out of its way to emphasize not only the difference in their physical stature, Rav standing over the butcher, but maybe perhaps there's a Marxist reading that could be offered vis-a-vis power and class, the authority of the distinguished rabbi towering over the lowly service worker. Huna, the one who senses that this confrontation is going to end in bloodshed at a slaughterhouse, by the way, of all places, seems sensitive to this power dynamic at play, wondering if perhaps Rav will abuse his power in the confrontation. Finally, is the Talmud warning us that there's a danger in our demanding an apology too directly? That kind of directness has real life consequences too, even if it's not always of the life and death variety. Two very different models, the Zera approach and the Rav approach. Each one carries its own merits and each one its own drawbacks. So we'll just pause here for 1 second and have a kind of an open conversation. Is one of the models more or less appealing to you, and why? How does this material sit with you? Where does it leave you? Yeah?
I think that the Rav didn't have the right to make a Eshbon HaNefesh, the counting of the butcher.
Yes, there's a judgment involved that you felt is improper. Okay, even though his feelings were legitimately hurt, he can claim his own feelings?
Claim his feelings, but he can't go into somebody else and tell him that he has to forgive him.
Okay.
He's the only person who's done that.
Anybody disagree? Anybody disagree? If somebody has hurt us legitimately, we don't have the right to respectfully, we don't have the right to cause violence, but we don't have the right to express our concerns directly? Okay. Uh-huh.
And understand that you may not still get your apology.
Uh-huh.
But maybe they don't know what they did.
Uh-huh.
Maybe they were unaware. And I think you can't penetrate someone for something they did to you.
Uh-huh.
Because they, in fact, didn't recognize it as a hurt.
Uh-huh. Great. Yep.
I was looking at it, or thinking about it differently, perhaps because I was the butcher. But I was really thinking that there was a spiritual death
Huh.
of the butcher
Yeah.
who did not recognize that he had hurt someone
Uh-huh.
and was just ignorant of that.
Great. Right. The moment the butcher says, "Are you Rav? Get out of here. I don't have anything to say to you." I mean, that's right. Right. That was a surprise. Do you want to say something? What do you got? It's nice and loud. Okay, let me make sure I heard you correctly. Even if somebody does something wrong to you, you can't always expect them to say sorry. Is that what you said? That is so true. And that is why we're having this conversation right now, is because, I mean, our young future leaders here understand the wisdom of this reality, but I think adults have a hard time accepting that sometimes. That's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for sharing it. Okay. What about the presence of Rav Huna, the best friend, so to speak, in this story? Now, if you're thinking about a difficult, direct conversation with somebody, you might want to check in with a trusted friend or advisor first and get their read on whether this is a good idea. And Rav didn't listen to the best friend. I mean, what do you do in that situation? Marcia?
I just have a question about the second story to begin with. The language is that Rav has decided to go and appease the butcher.
Yes.
Okay.
That is Talmudic code for getting an apology.
Appease.
Yeah, it's a poor translation, but that is the intent.
So that person could come and appease him.
I can't explain that, but the text is clear that you're looking at the first story or the second story?
Well, here the word appease means apologize.
Yes.
And here the word appease doesn't.
Well, Rav doesn't have anything to apologize for.
See, that's where I'm sort of going.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest that since a whole year or some serious time has passed and the butcher hasn't apologized to him, that maybe Rav has thought it over and decided maybe I did something to the butcher. And then when he shows up at the butcher says to him, I have nothing to say to you. And that sort of sounds the way I might feel if somebody had insulted me and then they come on over and I'm the one who's waiting for the apology. So,
The story is more complicated than we see at first glance, that they each have an issue with each other.
and that the butcher being unwilling to be open to the other guy's, to Rob's apology, and strikes the animal and the splinter hits him and kills him, is sort of God's judgment as to who was really and truly at fault.
All right, I like it. I think certainly it's true in relationships. It always takes two to tango. So more complicated at first glance.
I just have a very brief comment. I think Rosh should change butchers.
Well, he's going to have to, because this butcher is now out of business. The last word here. Yeah.
Does this, do any of these passages deal with forgiving without the apology?
Yeah. So this is where we're gonna end. That is such an important question, and that's a perfect setup to where we're going to end. So thank you. There's no final answer to this larger conversation. The essence of the Talmud is that it raises questions, it almost never answers them. But as we seek our own closure in this space, I want to conclude with an additional text which appears in a different part of the Talmud from Tractate Megillah 28a. There the rabbis are grappling with the meaning of the verse from the book of Micah in the Bible, which reads, God pardons iniquity and overlooks transgression. The rabbis suggest that this verse applies to the one who forgives a wrongdoer, even when the wrongdoer, or especially when the wrongdoer, doesn't apologize. The rabbis of the Talmud establish an idealistic virtue, that God is particularly forgiving of those who are generous in their forgiveness of others. We know that this isn't easy to do, but as the plights of Zerah and Rav illustrate, waiting for an apology or seeking it out aren't always the right paths either. My hope on this new year, that we might all know the comfort and lightness that comes with moving forward by fostering an even more generous sense of compassion to the ones who have hurt us, that we might be blessed with the healing and renewal that comes with the ability to begin again by letting go. Shana Tova.